was cool. The just hit the thing there.
Our cabin disappeared. What happened? We were back in the happy place again.
Everything was going so well.
And I think we're live again.
And then the show started.
And it all came tumbling down. We are live, I believe.
Hey, look, the cabin's back. Thank you, Lisa. Sorry.
Okay, now that we're back in the cabin, the show can begin. Hello and welcome to Live at Epiphan, our weekly show where we talk about all things streaming related and curiosities and interesting things. And we got...
your favorite live streaming show that talks about live streaming, streaming news.
Live streamingception. So, we've got an interesting topic today, maybe a little bit more of a nerdy, geeky one.
Totally. It's going to be a very technical look today.
Yeah, a little different from last week's AMA. So, but I think there's a lot of interesting information for a lot of our viewers here that hopefully will help them make some decisions when looking at live streaming gear.
USB buses.
USB.
Why should we care?
Well, you should care, and we're going to pick that apart.
Why?
But first we have.
Let's talk about some news. Yeah, some intros and news. So what's in the news this week? What did you actually shared a fun clip with me? So
yeah, not a lot of news. We did. Well, first we're coming up to Christmas, so I decided to wear my ugly Christmas sweater. I forgot to give you the heads up on that.
Yeah,
I
thanks. And I appreciate that you wore something that had green in it.
Yeah,
just which is specifically a wardrobe.
Well, it's not too bad right now. It's not too bad right now. The picture showing.
Why did I think that was going to work? Why did I think holding my hand up behind your sweater?
Anyway, so I like to listen to a fair number of podcasts, and these days, as a lot of people probably know, video podcasts and video stream podcasts are extremely popular, especially with comedians, probably in a large part attributed to guys like Joe Rogan, who really kicked off a major trend. It's essentially the de facto standard now for major comedians. Everyone's got a podcast. Most of them are video.
And it's a good segue to get us into who we're talking about, because he was actually the first one to do these kinds of podcasts. He was the first one using this technology.
Yeah.
And it's homegrown Ottawa boy,
Tom Green. Yeah. So I stumbled across Bert Kreischer's podcast, which I don't normally listen to. Sometimes he has an interesting guest.
I am the machine.
Exactly. The machine. Very popular story around here with our Russian colleagues. I happened to just notice in the YouTube feed that he had Tom Green as his guest. Tom Green, for those of you who don't know, is from here in Ottawa, where we are. He grew up just on the other side, on the east end of the city, down the street from where some friends of mine grew up. Cool. You know, it was common back in the 90s to just kind of see him around the city doing his show.
He'd be on the side of the road grabbing a dead moose or whatever.
You never know.
Whatever roadkill he might come across.
But at the beginning of this podcast, I found it super interesting that he was talking about the origins of his content creation and how it started on cable access and, you know, all these kind of pieces, and how he was probably an uncredited pioneer of live streaming, video podcasting, and that sort of stuff. And now he's really out there, and a big reason why, he goes into this big story, but the big reason why is that Ottawa, being the tech hub that it is,
Silicon Valley North.
Everyone he knew worked in tech, and so he had all these resources to draw from to help build it up. And I just found it really cool, really interesting. So if you want to check that out, it's Bertcast, which is Bert Kreischer's podcast, episode 320. I guess it's kind of the first 15 minutes or so, maybe up to the first 20 minutes.
I think it was like between the 10 and 25 minute mark he was getting into it, but the whole episode is great, and he does talk about some other projects that he's working on. And for me, it was really cool to learn about the history of Ottawa, because I know from friends that lived here and they grow up, you either go into tech or you go into working for the government. And those are kind of the two channels.
He definitely talks about that.
And he was in the right place at the right time. And even the product that he was kind of pioneering, or what they had put together, was very similar to what we have now with the Pearl.
Exactly, and he was talking about how he kind of doesn't do it anymore because he did this originally, had this super complicated, cool one switch set up under the desk.
Yeah, like a physical switch.
And then technology kind of passed him by, and he didn't really keep pace with it. But I think
when you lose touch with your tech guy, and everyone moves on, and it's just, after a while, it just doesn't work anymore.
For me, I think the primary takeaway from it, and what I want to convey to our audience if they want to check that out, is that he was doing something that at the time no one else was doing.
Totally. And that was like not even 20 years ago, right? Like it was still in the recent history.
20 years ago, and the realistic thing is that if you can find something, if you can find a piece of content or a way of creating that content it's easier now than ever to do live streaming, and everyone's doing it. It's really popular. Every comedian has a video podcast streaming. But it's not a closed market. It's still a market in its infancy. And it's one of the things we love to talk about on this show is all the ways that you can bring live streaming of whatever it is you want to do and bring it to the masses. You don't have to be a cutting-edge pioneer necessarily anymore. There's so many easy tools to use to get started that are super inexpensive. Why not jump into it? I guess other news, aside from that, was that a couple days ago, I had the honor of being a guest on a purely audio podcast.
Yeah, I have to check that out, so I haven't had a chance to listen to it
We
yet.
shared that on our Facebook page, so if people are interested in listening to me blabble on about webcasters, you can check that out, and chatting with one of our partners at Streaming Church.
Cool. Did you record locally and then
No.
you're going to send them the file, or did they do like an audio hijack?
We recorded it using Skype.
Okay,
The whole thing. We had a three-way Skype call with the two hosts and myself, and they recorded everything in Skype. They do a little bit of cleanup, and they post it.
Perfect.
And that's it. So it's available on iTunes, and they did put a YouTube video up as well, since not everyone can access iTunes right here.
Well, and Skype is now a high enough fidelity that you can do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Where a few years ago it was super crackly, but now you can just record it right off
Exactly. It works pretty well. So that's always an interesting one. And then you have some really cool news, I think, that's coming up, because this is episode 91.
This is episode 91. So in the new year, we're going to be celebrating our 100th episode, and to celebrate that, I know, 100. Right? It's insane. So 100 episodes on Live at Epiphan, and to celebrate that, we are working on a huge giveaway.
Huge.
Like
It's
not
huge,
huge with an H. It is huge with a Y.
Okay.
So you know it's a big deal.
It's huge.
Making live streaming great again. But we are going to be giving away a really cool package. We're still working out the details, so please stay tuned. We're going to be announcing some more details in the new year, probably on episode 93, which should be in the first week of January.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about that more. So stay tuned for that. And I see actually one person that slightly inspired the idea for this contest was Stefan in chat. So hey, Stefan, I can put the link to the podcast and the video in here as well. Yes, we'll get that in there.
Totally.
Craig is saying, what did you miss? Spit tea on your keyboard. I hope your keyboard's all right. You didn't really miss much yet.
Still tea on the keyboard?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Lisa, our producer, is cringing. We were just talking. That's why she doesn't have a drink during the show.
Oh, yeah, because she'll spill it all
everywhere.
All over the audio board and sparks and everything.
She'll just be holding, oh no, what have I done? It's everywhere.
Yeah.
All right, so let's jump into the story. We'll jump into the episode. So I have a story about USB.
Yeah, so we were talking about that,
USB
and
buses.
That inspired today's topic.
Totally. So we learned this the hard way. We were setting up a live streaming rig, and we were working with the IT departments, and they were doing procurement to get us all the best gear, and we were using a gaming laptop, and it was
super powerful.
Yeah, super
spent
powerful,
a fortune.
and it was crazy expensive Alienware or whatever it was. This crazy big laptop, and we were using an external capture device. I'm sorry to say it was a Blackmagic. What is it? Blackmagic Shuttle.
The Intensity Shuttle. Yeah.
So that was coming in, I think, via USB 3. Yeah. We had other peripherals. We had webcams coming in. We were using an external mouse, a keyboard. We had all kinds of stuff on this laptop.
Yeah.
And we tried to go to use it, and nothing was working. Right? The shuttle wouldn't work. The mouse wouldn't work. The cameras weren't working. And you look back at it now and you see how silly it was, but we started unplugging things and realizing, okay, well, if we don't have the mouse, then we can actually use this input shuttle. If we don't have this keyboard, then we can actually use this webcam, and we can actually use the trackpad that's on there.
External hard drive.
Yeah, totally. All of this stuff that was putting a lot of load on the USB bus. Yeah. And really what I didn't understand at the time was the fact that we were just overloading the bus, and there's only so much that you can put into the bus.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of inspired today's episode because it actually came up last week in our AMA. What's one of the number one questions? Probably not a direct question, but a resulting answer that myself and a lot of the guys in support deal with every day is talking about the importance of USB speed.
Totally.
And that's kind of exactly what we're talking about.
Well, I hear that over the wall a lot.
Bandwidth.
That's the first question, what do you have plugged in? Right?
As the more tech guys, bandwidth, whether it's network bandwidth or USB bandwidth, irrelevant, data bandwidth, no matter what type of port it's going over, is super important and becomes a bit of a sticking point for more technical people.
And bandwidth is like this pipe, right?
Yeah, pipes.
So Lisa, if you just
Pipes
take
of
us to
different
the
size.
laptop channel, show this.
Yeah, so this is more of a network style one in a way,
Totally.
but pipes on pipes on pipes, basically.
That's right. So you have this one pipe, and then you have all the different channels coming
Exactly,
in
and
through
sometimes they're just literally different size pipes. So if there are any plumbers watching, imagine a 2-inch pipe versus a 4-inch pipe.
I don't
and
know
how
if plumbers
much you
put
can
pipes
fit.
inside the pipes.
No,
I
they
think
don't. They
They put pipes
but-
next to the pipes.
But
you
that's
wouldn't
actually
wanna,
a better analogy in this case.
We're
Because
just stumbling across this perfect analogy for
exactly,
bandwidth.
but it's a matter of how much data you can fit down a pipe.
Totally.
It really is very basic, but can get complicated. So if we look at the history of USB, and a question I get often is, can I use AVIO HD on USB 2.0? Is it going to work? And the answer is yes, but it's going to not work very well, simply because there's not enough bandwidth on USB 2. And people go, well, why does that matter? So this kind of pulled this from Wikipedia, so
Literally
it's easy to find.
pulled this from Wikipedia.
Yeah, literally. But a little brief history of USB as a technology, going back to 1994 when the first standards were being ratified, all the way up to the more recent stuff. The most important things here really only started USB 2 and later. And here talking about specifics and speed. So USB 2.0, still very common today.
Totally.
Very common.
18 years later, it's still standard
yeah.
on a lot of laptops, a lot of
Yeah.
desktop machines, right?
And you'll see here that it talks about it being 480 megabit per second, Mbps. This is not a lot.
No.
Now, if we talk about internet speeds, that looks like it's ridiculously fast, because in comparison it is. But in terms of data transfer from a local perspective, it's not very much, especially when you start talking about uncompressed video.
Totally. Yeah, it's great to run a printer or a scanner,
Yeah.
right? Maybe an external hard drive, a little bit slower on the
Right.
the upload and the download, but still good. But then once you start bringing in that uncompressed video, then you need that big pipe. You need
Exactly.
a lot of data coming through it.
And the other thing that happens is, and really what we wanted to dig into, and I got some props and stuff we'll pull out here, is that when we're looking at these speeds, 480 for 2.0, theoretical 5 gigabit per second or 5,000 megabit per second over USB 3, which is the common standard today.
And
I would
USB
say.
3 is USB-C as well. That's the
It
same
can be.
designation.
Physical ports
Kind of.
are totally a different thing, because there's an
Yeah.
underlying technology and then there's a physical port on top of that. So today we're mostly wanting to talk about the actual underlying technology and not so much the physical port
We're
differences.
not going to tumble down that rabbit hole.
That's a whole other nightmare.
That's a whole other thing there.
And so, the difference there between USB 2 and USB 3 is night and day. It's massive speed difference.
Huge.
Absolutely massive. And that's one of the reasons why USB 3 is so important when we're talking about dealing with video, is in particular uncompressed video. Uncompressed video, if we take something like full HD 1080p at 60 frames per second, uncompressed, that is a bit rate of 3 gigabit. The total theoretical bandwidth of USB 3 is 5.
But you're not going to get that.
But you're not
going to
get 5.
Yeah.
And on top of that, there's extra data that might be paired with that video. So
Totally.
they're really coming pretty close to 1-to-1.
Where does the audio come in on that channel as well?
Well,
we
it
have
would be
video
over
and then
there.
There's also audio.
Extra digital
Yeah.
data, right? So it's not nearly as big as video. Even raw PCM audio is nowhere near as big as video, but it's still there. It's still a chunk of data. And when it's coming over that, it is going to be raw PCM. It's not compressed.
And so we're describing a setup that you might have on a laptop. So one of the most common mobile setups is where you have a laptop.
Right.
You're going to have that uncompressed video coming in on one of the channels or on one of your ports.
Yes.
And then you also have some other peripherals as well.
Exactly. And so one of the challenges that we face, and as laptops have become more and more popular, and desktops have really started to die out, one of the things that a lot of people run into is exactly what you ran into. You went out and you spent thousands of dollars on a super high-end gaming laptop, but at the end of the day, your bottleneck was USB.
Totally.
And trying to fit more data through USB than is possible.
And we think, okay, well, we've got this switch. We have a
Right.
we have a switch.
I got 4
We've got
ports of
the
USB
ports,
3. I should
exactly,
be able
the
to.
hub. We had a USB hub on there.
Exactly.
No, we've got 6 ports, but no, you
Pipes,
still had one
pipes
port.
on pipes, right?
Totally.
So one of the things is that with USB in general, as an overall topology, internally to your computer, there is a USB controller. that controller is what those speeds are coming from.
So I have a crowbar, and we're going to crack open your laptop.
Or...
Oh, we have a prop.
We have this wonderful prop.
So we don't get to break your laptop open?
No, we don't get to break the laptop open. Which side was it on here? Yeah, this is
we have the right side there.
Yeah, so we can switch to our overhead cam here. We went fancy today with the overhead cam. So this isn't a super close-up. We just wanted to do this for fun.
Yeah.
This is the complete motherboard out of an Asus Ultrabook that unfortunately, a number of years old now, but unfortunately it died. And our guys in the support department, Adam in particular, was attempting to fix it. Sadly, it was unrepairable. Yeah. Good news is we got some fun props out of it.
Totally.
Believe it or not, this is the entirety of the motherboard from a laptop.
Wow.
That's it.
The rest is batteries.
The rest is batteries and a display.
Hard drive? Oh, and the display.
No, but that's basically it.
So what are we looking at here? I recognize that there's a USB port on this
USB,
side.
USB, and there's a bunch of other stuff. Your CPU and everything are in the middle here. So the main thing is that right here is actually our USB hub chip. This is actually in front of the USB controller. These two ports both run through the board to this hub.
Okay.
And then to the controller. The controller, USB 3, is rated at that 5 gigabit theoretical speed. And this hub then branches that out to however many ports you might have. In this example, we have 2 ports. Both of these ports are running off of this one hub, which means both ports share that total of 5 gigabit because they're running off of one controller.
And is there other stuff that's also running off of this hub? Like it's not just these ports, we've got other kind of internal peripherals.
Exactly, and that's where things get interesting. So we tried to pick this apart and draw up another little graphic to try and show and illustrate all of these pieces. And of course, each USB device, whether it's connected to these ports or connected internally, they're all sharing that 5 gigabit pipe.
And you have like a webcam, there's a touch screen.
Exactly. So if we pull up that diagram, so Adam threw this together for us as well.
So this is based off of the piece that he took apart.
Yeah, so we tried to virtualize this little thing. But in this particular laptop, it had a touch screen, a webcam, Bluetooth, a couple other pieces, and those external USB ports.
We just punch in a little bit closer. We can see
we'll jump in a little closer. They're all funneling down to that root USB controller, which means the touchscreen controller, which you might as well consider a mouse and keyboard.
Yeah.
The webcam, which if you're using it actively, is going to eat up a good chunk of bandwidth.
And you sometimes are, right? If you're doing a live stream, if you're using character animator, if you have like a camera facing yourself, it's going to be eating up that bandwidth.
Bluetooth, maybe you're using that to tether to your phone for bandwidth. Who knows, right? There's lots of things there. There's also an SD cards reader on here, also funneling through USB. All of these devices funneling down to that single 5 gigabit means that if I connected 2 capture cards to this computer at full HD at 60 frames per second uncompressed, I am way over 5 gigabit in terms of my bandwidth needs, which means one of those devices is going to start dropping frames. And that's usually the first result we see is we can't maintain that 60 frames per second or 30 frames per second or whatever we're trying to do. We start losing frames. Maybe we drop to 15, maybe we drop to, who knows. If it was USB 2, purely mathematically because of the tiny, tiny pipe, you might get 5 frames per second at full HD simply because of data rates.
And that might be okay if you're doing like relaying an ultrasound or maybe like another piece of medical gear that you don't have to have that fidelity of the, having a 30 frames per second.
Well, exactly. And again, we're talking at 1080, right? If you're at 720, then it's going to be half that kind of thing, right? There's rules in here.
But if you're running out 4K content on YouTube,
the best way to think of it is resolution and frame rate. Every pixel of resolution equates to a piece of data. So the more there are, the more data there is, and so on.
So how can a user, if he looks at this, he's looking at his setup, he's realizing now watching the show, or he or she, that's why I can't
blew up.
I can't actually run anything off this laptop. How would you recommend actually getting into determining which port is best to use on maybe a laptop, for example?
Right. So laptops are the biggest challenge because, and actually this makes a great prop, because on some laptops, USB ports are typically paired together per controller.
Okay.
Right? So on a desktop,
so you have a couple on this side, one on this side.
likely, but not always, likely are on different controllers.
Yeah.
That's a good sign. On a desktop, it's really easy because every pair is usually on its own.
You can see it on the card. It's right on the PCI.
Plain as day. The front, if you have 2 ports on the front of your case, they're probably on one controller. The rear I/O of a desktop PC, again, they're usually on blocks of pairs. Each block of pairs is probably a different controller. You have the option of doing a PCI Express add-in card to add another controller. So desktops make it really, really, really easy. The
and
downside,
you're not limited to this funnel going in.
The downside with laptops, from purely a sheer number of peripherals, you would solve it by putting a USB hub in front of it. But a USB hub with 4 ports funneling down to 1 doesn't give us more bandwidth.
Yeah.
It means, again, we're sharing that root total. It's that root total that's the key. And that's one of the hardest parts with laptops, is because if you read the specifications of a laptop when you're shopping for it, it's not going to tell you how many USB controllers it has or how the ports are divvied up. That's not something.
You see that somewhere in the technical
you would think,
specs
but
buried in there?
They
no?
don't.
Okay.
And it's annoying. And so you kind of have to guess.
Yeah.
So you can look at.
Or you buy it and then you,
right.
you
so
figure it out.
For the more technically inclined, you can kind of get used to it. You look to spot things. Like I say, they're usually paired. So if you have 2 on one side, 1 on the other, or 2 on either side, you have a pretty good chance of distributing that load. It means that, let's just say, this is an exception of an older Ultrabook. Mine, for example, I have 2 USB 3 ports on one side and 1 on the other. These are on separate controllers on the opposing sides. So this laptop, I can actually get away with running a maximum of 2 capture cards at full HD at 60 FPS because I have externally 2 separate controllers. Not all laptops have that. And so when you're looking at it, the easy rule is if they're on opposing sides and there's more than 2, you probably can host 2 devices max. And you also have the option of figuring out which port is going to be best to use that's not shared with all those other internal peripherals like we were talking about, Bluetooth and touchscreens and webcams and all that other crap.
Are there any laptops that have like a PCI Express port on the side? I remember I had an old MacBook Pro that used to have that, right?
That's kind of gone the way of the dodo.
Yeah.
Expansion cards in USB.
Yeah, expansion card. That was
it's gone away. Now, in some cases, there are technologies, and Apple's a big fan of this, of using Thunderbolt to then break that out, because Thunderbolt has a higher theoretical bandwidth.
So you could have that Thunderbolt hub and then bring in the multiple sources. Potentially, yeah.
Potentially, but it's not a guarantee, and that's one of the tough parts, is that it's really hard. You kind of have to experiment. I actually recommend when you get something, go into, if it's in Windows, it's easier, but you can go into Device Manager and sort devices by connection in Device Manager, and it'll give you a tree of literally how everything is connected. And you can go into the USB controllers and hubs and see which devices are coming off of those internal hubs and controllers.
Okay.
And then as you plug and unplug things, you'll see them pop up in different parts of the list.
So that'd be the best way for someone at home to troubleshoot and see where that load is coming.
You want to find the one port that doesn't share it with anything else. That's the best way to just how to trial and error it and figure it out.
Cool.
Because ideally, we want to make sure that a device like the AVIO HD or the AVIO 4K, because of just plus minus variances to all these things, is able to use 100% of that USB 3 bandwidth by itself for ideal conditions. Otherwise, we might drop frames or whatever the case may be as data collides. Stefan was asking earlier, I'm not ignoring questions, I am watching them, guys. Stefan was just saying there's no QoS on USB. No.
What is QoS?
Quality of service. It's something usually referred to within networking, where certain types of traffic has priority over others, right? So here in our office, for example, we use IP-based phones. They have the highest priority of data traffic over anything else in the network.
Under the studio.
Theoretically. But again, to make sure that the phones, even if it means maybe Facebook loads a little slower, the phones never suffer, right?
Totally.
It's super important.
And why can't, and is that a limitation of USB?
It's just not part of the spec.
Okay.
It isn't there. And
because that would be great if you could identify that, the uncompressed source of video as your number one quality of service to guarantee that always comes through.
Right, exactly. And, the other downside is that certain protocols that go off of USB, like UVC, we talk about that a lot, which is what a lot of USB capture cards like our AVIOs leverage, Universal Video Class devices. It doesn't have any aspect of splitting the load between multiple applications. It's essentially peer-to-peer. You can't share it between different apps at the same time. Doesn't have any sort of QoS. It just plug it in and hope for the best. And most of the time it works fine. But there are various different limitations, you know, in terms of what you can do there. So in a perfect world, a desktop is always going to give you the best possibilities if you need multiple capture devices.
Totally.
Not only because you might be able to use PCI Express capture cards, which are going to give you even more possibilities, but because they'll have more USB ports, they'll definitely have faster CPUs and so on.
And shameless plug time right now. Obviously, the Pro line offers an awesome solution for
that's
that,
the other way of going.
hardware-based appliance.
Right. To eliminate all those different moving pieces.
Totally.
One of the reasons why standalone hardware appliances like the Pearl family of products, or even the Webcaster, are so popular and so useful is that you eliminate all this. You don't have to worry about it. You have a product that's built to task. It is specifically designed around doing only this, so you don't have to worry about it.
It does one thing and it does it really well.
Exactly, and it's not leveraging USB.
Well, on today's episode, we have 4 HDMI channels coming in.
Yep.
So we have our main camera. We use vMix for our social pop-ups.
Yep.
We also have the chroma key going on in the background. I'm using an AVIO to feed
overhead
in.
cam, the main
the
cam.
override cam, but I'm using the AVIO to feed in an HDMI stream from our laptop with this background that's an active channel.
Yeah.
And we have a behind-the-scenes camera as well. That's just a USB cam. So because that's a UVC device, just plug it directly into the Pearl, and you don't have to set anything up on it. It's just plug and play.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, it's a tricky thing, but I guess the main takeaway is, you know, the way things are marketed and advertised in technology is usually best case scenarios.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
Your internet provider is going to sell you that they're giving you X speeds. You're rarely ever going to actually achieve
you see that little asterisk, and you go way
results
down,
may vary.
way down. Optimal performance.
Yeah, results may vary. You're only going to get these speeds when directly connected to our hard line in our office.
You just see snowball's chance in hell, straight on the bottom there.
I actually get more than I pay for on my speeds, but that's a different thing. But USB is no different.
They're
right?
checking
I mean, it's something that is a variable. It's a shared bus. And any devices on that bus are sharing that total bandwidth, and that may be negative. So you want to check it out. You want to see what it is. At the same time, there are capture cards in the market that compress the video first in hardware and then send it over USB. Those are great for USB 2 needs because they're compressing it and sending it so that you can get a higher frame rate. The downside is that unlike something like a Pearl, the bit rates for that compression is usually not as controllable. So whatever the hardware is built for, that's what you get. And if you don't like it, too bad.
TS.
And you're probably, in some cases, re-encoding it again in another piece of software.
And are you going to see that change in the video quality? If
sometimes.
It's compressed, you're going to see artifacting and other things you just can't get away from?
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes. It depends on the devices. For us, all of our USB capture cards are uncompressed. And that's for a very specific reason. One, it means you're starting with the best possible quality chunk of data from the beginning, which is good, especially if you need to scale or crop or do anything like that.
And does the compression add any latency as well? Like if you're processing it will add that latency?
Yeah. And then in addition to that, we have a lot of customers that use our products in particular industries where compression is unacceptable. So medical is a good one.
Yeah, totally.
If you're doing medical imaging, compression is completely unacceptable. Things must be lossless uncompressed.
Well, if you're looking at like an ultrasound and you have an artifact that could be covering up a tumor or some other, actual something you have to see on that diagnostic, then that would be terrible.
So Craig was asking there in the questions, are all USB devices 5 volts? Do amps build up the more devices you plug in? Again, this, by specification, USB provides 5 volts. That's it, by spec. Batteries, those can be different because they don't have to conform to USB spec, even if it has a physical USB port. But from a laptop's perspective, they're going to provide 5 volts. Amperage will vary. There are specifications about amperages by USB spec, by the bodies that govern this. But that I find can vary a little bit.
But it's not going to stack up. It's not going to be more amperage with the more USB
Right, so
devices.
usually USB 3, for example, can usually provide 1 amp, 2 amps in some cases. But again, that's shared amongst all your devices.
Totally.
Right?
Totally.
So that's why hubs, you'll often see the hubs are powered.
Yeah, you'll have a 12-volt line going.
Yeah, or even just another 5-volt
yeah.
higher amperage because it has to split it amongst all those others again. But anything that conforms to a USB spec, you're not going to have to worry about. So that shouldn't be an issue.
And if you're like that,
is it possible to? Yeah, is it possible to overdraw? Just to Craig's question, is it possible to overdraw the amperage supplied? Yeah, it is.
Okay.
And it's one of the reasons why, again, chances are if you were trying to do that off of a single port, you probably have a hub anyways. Use a powered hub.
Yeah.
Absolutely use a powered hub.
What would be the impact of drawing too much power? Is it just going to be system performance is going to lag? The performance of those USB peripherals will lag as well?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I could have a little puff of cloud, like the alternator isn't going to burst on your laptop.
Right. Yeah. So it's just looking through some of the other ones here. Stefan was saying, so it would be better to use a dedicated IP network for connecting devices to your streaming PC. From there, you could have an extra network stream out. Yes and no. I mean, gigabit Ethernet is not necessarily not significantly faster than USB 3. In fact, in many cases, it's slower. So, no, not necessarily. If you have 10 gig, that's different, but most people don't. That would be totally different for moving data around on a network.
Well, and that kind of gets us into the NDI side, right?
Right. But
So
there
if you
again,
were to-
something that is compressed, but very lightly to help. And so you are looking at a different classification of device. Let's say that way.
Fair enough.
NDI is starting to replace a lot of the interconnectivity in professional studios because it's easier to run network than it is to run SDI cables everywhere.
Yeah.
But that's broadcast studios. That's not someone's home Twitch setup. Right?
Yeah, you're not going to have a floor that you can pop up the panels
Right.
and easily run all these cables through. I'm curious, what's Stefan saying in his last message there?
So he's saying, don't really get higher bandwidth immediately. Okay. Yeah, and then you said hidden one in there. Yeah, I'm not sure what you meant there, Stefan, so I can't really answer that.
It looks like Dutel figured it out, though.
Yeah, so there's a few things in here. Yeah, some suggestions, think of it mapping things out like you would an electrical panel. Yeah, exactly. You need to map things out and understand, certain things. A lot of people talking about spilling teas on laptops. Stefan was saying, what about getting some community guests on the show? Stay tuned.
Cool.
Stay tuned.
Well, and if you're in the Ottawa area and interested in
if you feel like
stepping
flying
onto the
to
set,
Ottawa at this time of year,
That's
I don't
right.
recommend it. But
yeah, we're not quite at the point yet where we're bringing hosts, we're bringing in guests on flights. But if you are in the Ottawa area, you're a content creator, please reach out.
We do try and interview people when we're on the road ourselves,
Totally,
as much as possible.
Or if you're going to be at an upcoming show, what's the next one that we have
The
coming
next
up?
one is ISE
Cool.
in Amsterdam. That's the first week of February. The one following that is NAB in Las Vegas. That's the first
forward to that
week of April. And then the one after that will be Infocom in Orlando in June.
Sweet. My feet already hurt just thinking of NAB.
Exactly.
That one, I think I'm going to get one of those power aids this year.
Oh, okay.
Like the chair with you roll around on that.
Yeah. Some people use Segways.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I could get a Segway. That'd be cool. Some roller skates.
Someone was asking, we're a little fast on our setup. Do we have a photo of the setup? We actually don't. We were just pointing out a random setup that we did for today's show. In terms of
which
our
was
studio.
that setup for?
Our studio setup, I'm taking it to
okay.
mean. No, so today's show was a little bit random because we wanted to show off this prop. So we threw our GoPro overhead to show an over-the-table shot. That's normally not there.
Yeah, and it's a device that we've used before.
Yeah.
And actually through
it's
our
not
4K...
a Hero 7.
It's not a Hero 7, but I did throw our 4K GoPro up there, and that way we could crop in on this and bring in that 4K channel into the Pearl and then actually crop in and still maintain a good image.
Exactly, yeah.
Cool. So I think that's it. We've talked about USB buses, kind of unpackaged that mystery. It was a mystery for me, and I was excited to learn more about it because, again, when we had that experience, we knew what the problem was, but we didn't know why we had that problem. Right. So it's really cool to actually explain it. And if you have any issues with your mobile setup, and this has answered any of those questions, please let us know in the chat. Yeah. And of course, if you have any questions about any of your devices or why they're not working, let us know.
Yeah, definitely.
Any of your Epiphan devices, I should say.
Yes. I might mock you if you call me for black magic.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially
I'm
Intensity.
having problems with my Hero 7.
Yeah, especially Intensity Shuttle. There's a reason why they don't really make those anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, so let's see. What do we have coming next week other than Christmas?
Other than Christmas. So we do have Christmas coming up next week. And, Merry Christmas, everybody. That's coming up.
And the Ottawa office will be closed for a couple of days.
That's right. The Ottawa office will be shut down. Now, we are going to be looking back at our 2018 predictions next week. So we have a special host, Dan Wallace.
Yes.
Dan Wallace used to be the the video producer here.
Yeah.
Until I slayed him Highlander style.
Right.
Because there can only be one.
Yeah,
unless we get two, and then we might actually get more work done.
Yeah.
But but no, Dan's going to come back. He's going to join us.
Guest
you guys
host.
are going to look back at your 2018 predictions, see which ones landed, see which ones, fell a little bit short of the runway. But
we'll see. I'm confident.
Totally.
Maybe not.
Now I do have a surprise for you. I'm just going to get out.
Oh, a surprise. Uh-oh.
Just going to go down to the basement
to the
here.
basement. For surprises? I'm not sure if I like surprises.
Oh, surprises are good.
Uh-oh.
And then back up.
Does this conform
from the
to
basement again?
To our new policies?
Absolutely not. But I didn't attend that meeting, so.
Oh, that was the excuse.
I have an exemption.
What do we have in here? For those of you who don't know, the LCBO is our communist government-run liquor store here in Canada.
Merry Christmas.
Oh, thanks. Oh, I didn't get you anything. Now I'm going to be in trouble.
I was hoping you'd feel bad about it.
I do feel bad now.
That's really the gift. That's the gift of giving, is making other people feel bad.
Collective Arts. Good
yeah,
brewery.
it's my
Very
favorite. One of my
brewery.
favorite breweries here in Ontario.
Which one is this? Okay, they're IPA number 7.
Yeah, it's a good one.
And chocolate.
So if you like the hoppy beer,
that's great.
Now, I should mention, it's not a full bag of chocolates.
You ate most of them on the way here?
because it's like my favorite chocolate.
Well, that's fair.
But I thought, you know what, I can't just give them a beer. I gotta have some chocolate.
Well, now I feel bad. I'm going to have to invite you to come with us after work tonight, where the support team, we're going out for pizza and beer. So you'll have to join us for that. It's our traditional Christmas thing to do.
I had pizza for lunch, but there's always
never an overload of pizza.
That's right.
Especially smoked meat pizza.
Ooh, smoked meat pizza.
Well, I'll introduce you to the best.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's going to wrap it up. Thanks, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you very much. Merry Christmas.
Enjoy your time with friends and family over the next little while for the holidays. We will see you next week for that super special guest appearance show.
That's
and then, of course, in the new year, we'll have more stuff coming.
That's right.
The holidays fall kind of funny for our show scheduling. So I think our first one in the new year will actually be Palo Alto hosting.
That's right. So our team down in Palo Alto, they're going to be showing off their mobile setup. It's actually a pretty cool rig. They use a webcaster, and it's pretty nice. So they're going to show that off.
Americans don't get as much holidays as we do, so we'll let them take over for a week.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's warm down there.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll be frozen here. We're expecting an ice storm tonight.
Oh.
Anyway, that's it for us. Thank you, everyone. We will see you next week and next year as we continue moving towards that super secret 100 episode major thing we're going to announce soon.
And if not, then we have to go back and delete this VOD.
We'll come up with something better.
Happy holidays, folks. Thanks again for joining us. Don't forget to follow us on all the socials.
Yeah, links, follow, subscribe, all the socially things.
Like it, share
You know the drill.
You know the drill.